Welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is February 19th, 2025, a Wednesday, and we are going to look at a weekly update, or it hasn't happened for a few weeks, but an update of where prices are and how the weekly DCA strategy into Power Law following assets is coming along. And as always, this is not financial advice, it's for informational purposes only, so you should do your own research. So, as a quick reminder, the power law following assets are those assets that in the log graph seem to follow a straight line. And an example would be here Bitcoin, which is following this trend line. We take the log in the x-axis, log in the y-axis, and we plot them. And that's the blue line, the price line. And we can see that the orange line shows a very strong trend line through this. And we can measure that by looking at this R squared, which in this case is 0.9654, which means about 96% of the variation in the lines is variation in the price is explained by the trend line. And the number of data days tells us what sort of history we have for this, how many different data points that we have. And as far as my knowledge, there are only two assets that seem to crypto assets that follow power laws very strongly. One is Bitcoin, and the other one is Kaspa. And for Kaspa, the chart ends up looking something like this. And we'll see that the number of days in Kaspa is much lower. So there are fewer data points out there. And you notice the equation also is quite different, with the R squared now having dropped below 0.90. And you can also see the reason for that is because we've deviated from this trend line quite strongly towards the end over here, towards the last few months, 6 months or so. And what I want to talk about is how in this kind of environment with a lot of negative price action with Kaspa taking place, how I think about the situation. And when looking back on some of these, some of the negative price action, how it can be very discouraging mentally sometimes to look at this, and can give you a few different ways that I'm looking at the situation, and hopefully they will be able to give you guys some insight also. So first of all, let's just outline the strategy really quickly. The strategy is that there is a daily amount, a DC amount, which in this case is $100, which I have recently from about December 12th, I stepped that up to 200 because the logic is the lower the price goes, the more you want to buy, right? And so this is a matter of not getting scared when the price goes down if you have faith in the long-term asset. So daily between $100 and $200, and the distribution of those assets, the distribution of that happens according to this triangle which I've developed, right? And it looks at what the expected returns are and also looks at the confidence given how much price history we have for those different assets, and then makes a decision saying, okay, this is the amount of return that we expect, but we're not quite so sure of it. So it's a mathematically precise way to figure out what the distribution of assets is going to be. And distribution right now for today is 63% into Kaspa, about 17% into Bitcoin, and 20% in cash. And we always keep some amount in cash because there's always crazy volatility in the crypto markets. And when the price drops down, we want to have the ability to buy whatever asset has become cheaper, right? And so what I wanted to show you guys was today, on the 19th of February, the average price of the Kaspa that I've paid is about 11.2 cents, which compared to a current price of about 10.8 is not too bad. We are running at a little bit of a loss. On the Bitcoin, of course, the average price is considerably lower, 78,000, and the Bitcoin price right now is at 96, so we're in profit from the Bitcoin side. But the reason why this price has been driven down, even though if you look at what the price action was, is because of the strategy of DCAing, in which you put a constant dollar amount in. So if you look at this in the last year, we started in about August, right? From this point onwards, and the price was about 17 cents, and the price has dropped down a lot. But the average price has also tracked down with this because the lower it goes, the more we end up buying because it's a constant dollar amount. And the other thing that I've done in this is I've also had bulk buys, which I've documented here so you guys can see I'm being very transparent about this, of deploying the cash at what I consider good points, right? So there is some amount of discretion here taking place, but you can see that I put in a lot of Kaspa available at 9.5 cents. Now, I didn't think it would go down that low, but this is crypto land and all sorts of crazy things happen with the volatility. And if I didn't have the cash to deploy at all these different points, then I would not have had such a low average price, right? And I said low average price is just a little bit above what the current price is right now. And even though in terms of total profits, I'm down by about 10%, I think there's a very good chance that this will convert into serious profits once the price of Kaspa rises. And I think there's a high probability of that happening. So just a little bit of background here to catch up on what our expectations are. And again, the caveat here is if the future is like the past, right? And I don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if anyone tells you, hey, this is what's going to happen, then run, because we can have probabilities that we can attach to it, but no one knows for sure. Okay. So if the previous trajectory is similar to what's in the past with Bitcoin, we expect that the value of Bitcoin that we're going to see about the end of the year is going to be around 100, or the year's time is going to be about 150,000. There's some problem with this graph here. That's why I made a pause. It's not accurate here. The price is accurate in the graph in the spreadsheet. So the expectation is that we can hit about 150,000, and the current price is about 95,000, right? So you're looking at roughly about a 50 or 60%, 57% return, which is pretty good. If again, the future is like the past. And if you do that similarly for Kaspa, now again, I will give you some caveats on this. If we think that it goes back to this trend line, we think that the price of Kaspa is going to be about 67 cents in a year's time, right? So now you're probably thinking of, yeah, sure, it's going to be that high, given all the recent price action. But this is just looking at the entire history of what's been happening with Kaspa so far. And the R squared value here has dropped, but that doesn't mean it could still not be following a power law. It may get back to that power law. Likely what I think is going to happen, that is going to follow some sort of deviated power law, because we have lots of changes in the protocol happening. If you look back here, a lot of the craziness started happening around September 15th, which coincides with the launch of KRC20. Right at that point, miners started making a lot more money through transaction fees. They probably dumped that into the market. That changed the trajectory of the power law that we have. Now we have the 10 blocks per second change. Also, I think it's called crescendo, is about to come in some time. That's also likely going to change the power law in ways that we can't fully predict. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But unlike Bitcoin, which has got essentially the same protocol over so many years, over 15 years or so, Kaspa is a much more is a protocol that is changing a lot more, and so we can't expect it necessarily to follow the same power law. We can hope, but this is our best guess on what would happen, right? If we weigh all the stuff that has happened in the past equally, and then make a prediction based upon that. And again, it's a probability; no one knows for sure. And so I wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight into what I see is happening. First of all, let's just take a look at how Kaspa is doing versus other elements in the crypto markets. You can see versus Bitcoin, it's been doing pretty badly again from 15th of September, right? But now that seems to have stabilized a little bit somewhat. From about the first week of February to now, we actually seem to be doing quite well. And also when we look at Kaspa versus the broader crypto market, again, September 15th, that's when the shit show started. And again, from about the 5th or about the 7th of February onwards, we're doing a little bit better than the rest of the crypto market. Does that mean that it's going to continue? I can't tell you, but all we can do is saying at some point it's going to hit its bottom and then likely rise up. Because Caspar does have a few unique things about it, right? It was following a power law. Now we know that up till here we had a very high R squared, and it was following that particular trajectory, and then the protocol changed and other things might also have happened, right? Maybe now the power law is irrevocably broken because people's ideas of how this thing was going to grow no longer exist. Those are all possibilities. But I did want to give you guys a framework for thinking about how to deal with this negative price action. So the first thing I like to do is look back at the entire history. Okay. So it was following this particular price action and then it changed. Is there a reasonable probability that it may come back to that trajectory? I think there's a reasonable probability. I don't think it's zero, but I don't think it's 100% either. So no one knows, again, like I said, what the future is, but look at all the data in the past and then come up with a decision, right? Come about with, okay, I think that it could be this percentage likelihood that it's going to come back to the original power law trajectory. Transparently, I think that there's probably about a 30 to 40% that we're going to come back to this original line. And I would like that to happen since, of course, I'm an investor, but I have to assign those probabilities in my head and even write those down and say, okay, I think there's a 40% chance or 30% chance it comes back to this trajectory. What do I think is the most likely outcome? I think there's a 40-50% chance that we start following a revised power law. I think what's going to happen is that the dynamics that allowed Kaspa to have this power law in the past, which is incredible. The same thing was happening with Bitcoin. They will stabilize at some point. Now, once they stabilize, what sort of trajectory or what sort of gradient will it have? So looking back on this, is it going to have this same sort of curve? Is it going to be a lower curve? Is it going to be a higher curve? My guess is that it would be a lower curve, right? Because things after all the craziness that's happened, I think it would be very optimistic to think, oh, it's going to not just go back to the previous trend line, but beat the previous trend line, right? We'd like that to happen. I think that's unlikely. So I assign about a 40% probability that it's going to follow a power law again at some point. But I think the gradient of that power law is going to be lower. And so this 539% expected return is going to be lower. I don't know how much lower it's going to be because predictions are hard, especially about the future, but that is my guess, right? So maybe about 30 to 40% that we end up going back to the original trend line. I'd say 30% and maybe about a 40% chance or 50% chance that we end up following a revised power law, right? So the 30 and the 40 end up giving us about 70%, 30 to 50, 80%. I think there's a 20% chance that it could just go lower. All right. I think that there's a chance that we just either continue just bouncing around in this current sort of situation and we don't ever really come back to that sort of power law growth. And in that case, we don't have the kind of growth that we were hoping for. That being said, in all three of these scenarios, I think there will be chances to exit at higher prices than where we are right now. As a whole, the entire altcoin market is sort of depressed right now, and I don't think it really takes off until quantitative tightening ends and quantitative easing happens. And that might take a few months to happen. It might take half a year. It always takes longer than you and I think. Okay. So the important question to ask yourself is the most important one is, can I sleep at night comfortably with my allocation to Kaspa? Forget about megabucks coming through. If you can't sleep at night, then you're too extended into Kaspa or whatever other crypto or investment that you're in, right? So that is your body just telling you like, hey, I have put too much in. This is not a good situation for me to be in. So that would be my first caveat. The other caveat is if you really are very discouraged with Kaspa, there are other alternatives. And if you want to follow them in a quantitative way, you can look at the granddaddy of them all, which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been doing pretty well and it's still on track with the power law as we can see here. And the estimate that it's showing is a 50%, 60% return over the next upcoming year. That's a really good return, right? And if you have made some losses in Kaspa, as most of us have, 60% return is a really good place for you to be putting some portion of your portfolio and making back a lot of those losses. That's the highest power law asset with the most confidence that we can think of. And 60% is a fabulous return. So hedging your bets would be a great idea. Right now, with the stuff that I'm doing following this triangle allocation, I'm allocated to about 17% to Bitcoin. Maybe you want to increase that allocation. Maybe you think like, hey, I'll go 50% Bitcoin and 50% Kaspa, or maybe I'll go 50% Bitcoin and 20% cash and 30% Kaspa. This is just my particular journey and I'm sharing it with you guys, but you have to figure out what is going to work particularly for you, right? So maybe sit down with a piece of paper and get an idea of what that is going to look like for you. And the flip side to that sort of thinking is, look, prices are depressed right now for Kaspa, right? The triangle is indicating that we want to be focusing the majority of the assets into Kaspa because the returns are that high. And the right time to buy is when prices are low. And a mental state of mind that I put myself in is thinking, look, with any investment, there's going to be some sort of pain. Either the pain is going to be when I buy it, or the pain is going to be when I sell it, or along the way to my selling journey. So choose when you want to be uncomfortable, because making money means going against the herd at some point. So you either buy high and the prices go lower and you have to hold on to it, as most of us have done, or you buy when the sentiment is really bad. All right. And now, right now, sentiment in Caspa is not really good. Of course, it was lower. Right now, we're at 10 and a half cents, 10.6 cents, but we were considerably lower, right? So maybe around 8 cents. That's when sentiment was really bad. But we might get down back there, which is, again, really important to have some cash on hand, because you never know what sort of chances you're going to get. And the one thing that I have learned through this journey over the last 6 months is we always get great opportunities to enter. We just have to make sure that we have cash available. And that's what I've done, I've had these limit orders placed at values that I didn't think at that particular time point that we would get, but we did. If someone had told me we're going to get 7.5 cents a month and a half ago, I'd have said, "What are you talking about, man? That's not going to happen." But it did happen, right? So keep some cash on hand, because the worst feeling for me is seeing the price drop down low and not having cash to deploy at that point. So what I've done with this is I DCA in every day. I've stepped up the DCA buying when the price goes down, because I believe in what this is going to be. I think Kaspa has a great technical product. They have a good team behind it. There seems to be a lot of crowd support behind it. There's a community around it. And those are all things that give me some conviction. So I encourage you to do the same sort of research and dig into it and figure out what is going to be your particular comfort level, which is why, again, in these videos, everyone says it's not financial advice, but you just won't have the conviction to hold on when things go south if you haven't done your own research. So I encourage you to dig into it. And again, the most important thing is figure out an allocation that is going to allow you to sleep at night, right? Getting rich quick is not easy. And we don't know whether we're going to get rich off this or not. But the question has to be for you that you have to ask yourself is, look, will this allow me to sleep well at night? So yeah, at this point, this current allocation is allowing me to sleep pretty well at night, DCAing $200 in every day, the majority of it going into Caspa, having some cash to deploy, and a percentage of it being allocated, 15 to 20% being allocated to Bitcoin. I won't know when this turns profitable or if it turns profitable, but I think there's a high degree of confidence that it's going to work and allows me to sleep well at night. So I think in the short term, we may experience some volatility, but in about 5 to 6 months, we're definitely going to see higher prices, in my opinion. And like I said, I think there's about an 80% probability in my mind that we are going to get higher prices, and a 20% probability that we bounce around the same or maybe go down a little bit lower. Anything could happen, but that's sort of my mental mind map, and I wanted to share. So see you guys on the next video, and cheers and thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and share with others that might benefit from. Cheers.